Hi all, this is a painting guide on how I achieved this tile. These are the paints you'll need, so please pause it and make a list. So one of the important parts of this whole painting guide process is to use some of these tile covers. Now you can get these from, I think it's Cults or one of these other 3D printing places online. If you've got a friend, get them to print them for you. And the great thing about them is they're magnetizable. I think they use 5mm magnets by 1mm. You also get some of these which actually go over the vents as well. So some areas, as you can see there, have been undercoated with Wraithbone spray, and I've then obviously shielded them off, and then I've covered the rest of the entire floor tile in any sort of grey primer. Now in this case we use Halford's grey primer. And I will be using a airbrush for this painting guide. And the first colour I'll be using is Vallejo Concrete, a bit of airbrush thinner, and obviously the airbrush flow improver. Now, if you haven't got an airbrush, this little thing I've got here in my hand is about £18–19 from eBay. So anyone can get hold of it. It's really nice and easy to use. And yeah, just have a little play and you'll be an expert in an airbrush in no time. There's plenty of good videos online. It's also really good just for base coating armies and the like. Alright, the next step is to make a mixture of 1:1 Citadel Carrick Stone to Vallejo Concrete. This will be then liberally sponged over all of the floor tiles to give a real nice concretey effect. And here you go, you can see me just using a standard kitchen sponge, just sponge, sponge, sponge. Make sure you tear it up a bit because it gives a better effect than if you're using the flat edge. And there we have the finished sponging effect. Alright, next thing we're going to do is use any other tile, and we're going to quickly put little 5mm magnets all over it. Doing this really speeds up the next step, so it is worth doing. You can go around and just put them underneath if you really feel like it, but this is just so much more satisfying. So here we go, here comes a tile full of those little tile covers, and all we've got to do is hover over, and then all the magnets are immediately yanked up underneath. Now we're going to be painting all the little metal bits between the tiles using these three spray paints: matte black, trench brown, and a copper. Alright, so first off black, then onto the trench brown all over. Nice and liberal cover. And then after that, a nice little dusting of the copper. This has a nice little sheen to it. And then straight after that, I'm going to go back over it again with the trench brown again, just to soften it back down. And then we'll do a nice little dusting of lead belcher, just a small little one, nothing too heavy. And that's because the underhive is quite dark and grim, so you don't want anything too shiny. And here's the finished result. So we can take these tiles off now, we don't need them, so we put them to one side. Obviously it's quite good to run a train on multiple tiles at the same time, so that's what I would recommend. And here it is. So it's got a nice little sheen to it at the moment. You might notice a few places where maybe the little tile covers managed to spill through. Touch them up with a little bit of paint here and there. So then we're going to be adding the nice little floor tile transfers that I've made. So these have all been CAD'd up by myself, and you can get them quite easily on the Battle Bunnies blog under Battle Bunnies downloads. We will also find the how to print guide, which is nice and simple, and how best to use them. Now all my transfers have been printed onto a clear transfer sheet. I prefer using the clear ones to the ones which are on white, because the white ones seem to get a frayed edge for me sometimes. That's also the reason why I undercoat the areas I want to put the transfers on in a nice Wraithbone or white, so it'll get the proper colour through. So this little bar here between the two tiles will need to be painted Wraithbone underneath so that the colour comes through properly. So just using standard Wraithbone Citadel paint to get that done. After that you can go straight to Microsol, or in this case I'm using Microset, just to cover the tiles up so they're nice and ready for the transfer to come on top. And when it goes on top, it helps, the Microsol or the Microset helps the transfer to fit nicely and to adhere to the surface a lot better. So there we go, you can see it's a transparent kind of transfer there. There we go, it's plotting on. And there we go. Then we put a bit more of the Microset on after. Now this helps push down and flatten the transfer to the surface underneath. And obviously plan ahead and start doing a few areas at the same time so you can do it as quick as possible. And after that, you want to use a sponge to push down onto the transfer. Don't push and sort of swipe, because it will start moving it around and that'll obviously ruin it. But obviously push straight down, you'll eventually start adhering to it properly, and it makes it a lovely finish. So I'd use this on every transfer you do, including shoulder pads and everything in the future, because it just makes your life so much easier. And then we're going to be doing the bar ones, which come between the two tiles. Now some of these have rivets and the like on them, so all we're going to try to do is add a bit more microsole to these, because it'll help soften the transfer enough so that when you actually sponge it down, it actually pushes it into the rivet a bit more. So at the later stage when we do the oil buff, you'll see that it sort of helps accentuate those details as well. So there we go. Just keep plodding through until you have the entire thing completed. And if you have enough microsole underneath, you can use your finger to sort of slide it around a bit as well first, just to get it in the right place. Right, then after that, give it a good old push down, like I said. That brings out those details. And don't worry about the little white marks around the edges, because the oil buff later will hide these. Then we're going to put some Vallejo gloss varnish on the areas where we're going to be adding the black transfers to. So one up here. Remember, don't go mad with transfers. You don't need them all over the place. It ruins it. Less is more. So putting a few dotted around, and also bearing in mind that there will be building walls and stuff like that all over this scenery. So yeah, just some of them might get obstructed or hidden. Also, as you're putting the transfers down, try to think of, would the transfer actually go in that location in relation to the other tiles when they're placed nearby. So that's one thing I would do really recommend keeping in your mind as you do this. So before we do anything else, we're going to want to seal this with a nice gloss varnish. Okay, so let's compare it to one of the old cardboard tiles from the old Necromunda Underhive set. So you can see the colours are getting quite close, but obviously ours is a lot cleaner. So we're going to make it really nice and dirty now. So to achieve this, we're going to be doing a oil buff. Now I use oil buffs for quite a lot of things, including Titans, big old models and stuff like that. So we need a mixture of 3 parts burnt sienna to 1 part black to 2 parts burnt umber. This will be all mixed together using mineral spirits or white spirits. I prefer using the odorless stuff because I don't like the smell. I would always suggest having the window open and use gloves when you're obviously doing the application part anyway. So mix it all together with a paintbrush until it gets to a nice kind of thin gravy-like consistency. So just keep mixing it until you're all nice and happy. And then, when it's got a lovely gravy-like vibe, I'm going to start slapping it onto the areas all over the model. Now, you can use a bigger brush for this, or you can do a smaller brush, but I want to show you some alternative ones. So we've got 3 different versions of the streaking grime here. Now this is because some people might not be so confident with oil buffs, but I prefer using oil buffs to the enamels. But if you want to buy these instead, then please feel free. I thought I'd just quickly show you a few. So there's this one here, which I'll put in the bottom right hand corner. And then there's this one here, which I'm putting in the bottom left corner. And I think we've got one more, which I'll slap right at the top of the model as well. I normally use the AK Interactive streaking grimes for the side of vehicles or even the side of walls in the Underhive. And they are really good, so I would really recommend adding them to your collection if you haven't already. Practice makes perfect. The first time I actually used them, I ended up winning a, what was it, Forge Best in Show with them, so that was great. And I think there's an app called AK Interactive, which you can actually see a lot of the painting guides and how they use some of their paints and their supplies to get some cool effects. So yeah, it's worth looking at that. Anyway, so there we go. You can see I've slapped it on in 3 different places, so you've got an alternative choice if you really want. But I'm going to cover the rest of the tile with the remaining paint from the oil buff mixture that I've made up. And there we have it. So the next stage is to let it dry. Make sure it's at a point where it's only slightly damp, Don't want it completely baked on, but you want it so you can still rub it off. So here we go, blue gloves, make sure they're on, and we'll go straight into the buffing off part. So just get an old cotton t-shirt, tear it up, and start in one corner, and obviously change it up regularly and move it around. But choose a little finger and wipe it off. There you go, you can start seeing it's coming off nicely. If it doesn't come off nicely, you can use something like a bit of white spirits actually onto the fabric, and it will help lift it off and help come it off. I'll bring it off quicker. So that's a good thing about the fact we've sealed it beforehand, is that we can easily go back down to that level with white spirits if we really need to. So there's the bottom right hand corner AK Interactive. Looks a bit cold, got a slight greenish tint to it, but looks good still. Then we'll move on to the other side on the bottom left, and as you can see, it's coming off it's a bit stuck on. So I'm going to come back to that in a while, and we'll add a bit of white spirits to that to try to buff that off a bit better. And the middle AK Interactive area is a bit baked on as well, so we'll come back to that, a bit of white spirits a bit later. So let's carry on with the rest of the buff. So obviously if you want to have it extra grimy, you want to buff off less. If you want it not so grimy, you want to buff off more. You can always add more on later if you need to. If you skim it, then you obviously leave more stuff in the recesses, which is good. And as you can see, it comes off really nice and easy, and the transfers underneath are protected. So let's have a buff of the chevrons right in the center. As you can see, we can still see the rivets where the microsole has managed to push the transfer down, which is great. So as you buff this off, you want to try to keep a bit of the residue in the corners where the transfer met the metalwork. But you can always come back and add some little pin washes of this oil buff later if there are any bits of white still visible. Or you can always add something like typhus corrosion if you don't want to get any more oil paint back out. I'm guessing you're looking to your right now and seeing quite a lot of that oil paint still left. So it doesn't matter either way. There we go, it's coming off beautifully. So now we're going to be utilising some white spirits and a bit of old rag to get rid of some of the baked on areas from the AK Interactive ones where I must have obviously left it on a bit too long. So just get an old paintbrush, dab on some white spirits or mineral spirits, wherever you are and whatever it's called in your locale. And if you tap it on like this, you can kind of use it to sort of sponge off the paint which is on the tile. If you put a lot of it on or really soak it, it will come off really quickly, and you don't really want that to happen. You want it to come off softly. So that's why I really do suggest, putting it onto a fabric surface, a fabric before putting it straight onto the tile. And as you can see, it's coming off really nicely and actually realistically, which is the important thing in this case. If you do put the white spirits directly on, like this, it comes off really quickly. So if that's the effect you're going for, go mad, but I always say it's probably best to do it onto the fabric first. There we go, so let's have a little look. So bottom left, that looks good. It's probably the closest to the original oil buff which I made. They do look good, it does look good. The ones at the top, it's a bit more red, but if that's what you're after, then yeah, you can use that one. And then the bottom right, it's very, you can see it's very cold looking. So if you wanted to go for something maybe even like the Hive Secundus setting, then that could be a good option. Next step, let's use some cotton wool buds. Obviously try to get the most eco-friendly ones as possible. I always go for the ones with wood in the center or bamboo. It can be good to sort of soften one end of it by tearing it off, or tearing the tip off, and then you just wipe it into the recesses, and it helps get the stuff out which you couldn't get out from a cotton rag. If you really need to, you can always add a bit of white spirits to it, but best thing to do is do this until the point where it's not coming off anymore, and either turn it over or tear off a bit more of the tip, so you can just keep using it until it gets almost down to the, in this case, wood. And if you do get a lot of residue onto your cotton wool bud, you can dab that around the model and give it a bit of grime on the tiles, so it adds to a little bit of realism. and you can hop from one side to the other, softening it and pasting it on, like I'm doing there. At this point, I also thought it'd be worth me going over the AK Interactive tiles and making sure it fits in with the rest of the model, so that's me just doing that now. There we go, it's all nice and uniform now. Now, if you remember earlier when you saw the cardboard tile from the old Necromunda Underhive box game, it looks very, very similar to that now, which I'm very pleased with. I also mentioned to hold on to some of the cutouts from the old transfer sheets. They'll be useful in a while when it comes to like sponging on or doing a bit of dry brush around the painted areas, like so. So all you're going to do now is go around the model. If you find any areas where you need a bit of grime, paint them in, like I'm doing here. So just add a bit more grime here and there. But also all the metal work bits, you're going to want to add a bit of rust too. So here's an example of one that I did previously as like a test. Now I went a bit mad with the rust, so I wouldn't say go that mad. But you can see I've used powders and I've used various different things to actually achieve this vibe. But I wasn't too happy with the actual main tiles because I thought they were a bit too bright. So I decided to redo it and absolutely film it with a different ratio. But here's an example of kind of a finished one if you wanted to go pretty much straight to Wraithbone. I'm not too happy with that. As you can see, side by side, I think the one on the left looks a bit more ferrocrete, so I'll be darkening that one down later. As an alternative, you can use this. So Chaos Black spray paint all over, the Mechanicum Standard Grey sprayed in the centre of all the tiles, as you can see there. And then all you got to do is cover it over with some of that oil buff paint, then buff it off, and you get this sort of kind of grimy grey. So that might be an alternative that you're after, but obviously you've got lots of different things that you can try as a base, but this is one which I decided not to go with. I wanted to go for a bit more of a coloured one, which is more fitting to the original Necromunda Underhive cardboard tiles. Next thing you want to do is add a few little splotches of Blood for the Blood God. So once again, don't go mad. We don't want this to be a huge bloodbath. Blood doesn't always stay red, so just add a few splotches here and there. If you want to feel a bit brave, you can do it with handprint or do a smudge. So you could put a little mark on the ground and then almost drag it out so it looks like somebody's dragged their body away via a certain route. Also, when somebody gets shot, they're going to be leaving a little trail of blood droplets, so you can use that. Just try to use it to tell a story, but don't rely on it as a it's going to make the board even better. Nurgle's Rot, that's another cool thing to use. Little bits here and there. Don't go mad with it once again, just less is more. It's always the thing with the Underhive. So put little spills here and there, and it does add a little good vibe to the scene. Dirty Down Rust is another thing you can use. Now, I always find Dirty Down Rust a bit hit and miss. So test it a few times first, make sure you shake the heck out of it, and if you really don't like it, then I think sometimes it's worth just putting it to one side or using it for another project. I've had a few where it's just failed tremendously, and I have heard there have been some bad batches out there, so it's up to you whether you want to use it or not. Light Rust, so all the rust weathering powders, I think these are gold dust now because they're very, very, very rare. Obviously they're out of production as well, but there are good alternatives like the mid-range. I think they have some really good rusts as well. So you can have aged rust, light rust, orange rust, and all these different ones. As you can see, I've got a fair few here, so I thought I'd just show them off. Here's a close-up of the tile, pre-weathering powders and pre-blood, so you can see it is nice and effective. This is one mixture I do recommend. You want a fresh pot of Lamian Medium, and you want a big dollop of Scrag Brown into it. So all you got to do is almost turn the Scrag Brown upside down, let one big dollop go inside it, shake it up thoroughly, and it makes this lovely rusty glaze that you can put on. So with that, all you do is just sort of push it over the metalwork, and it goes straight into the recesses, and it looks fantastic. A guy from Citadel, who actually does all the terrain, actually showed me this technique, and yeah, it's really, really good. So I do recommend using this before you use any weathering powders, because obviously wet doesn't deal well with weathering powders. You can also recess wash this into the recesses between the metalwork and the actual ferrocrete as well. Gives a nice effect. But as with everything else, less is more. And yeah, getting almost there now. I really do love this technique. It does really complete the tiles, especially in Necromunda. Next stage is to add a nice little edge highlight of Iron Warrior. And to do this, we sometimes might have to use an old piece of card from the old transfers and just do a bit of a careful edge highlight there, like that. So that's where this comes in use. So the reason why we're edge highlighting is because with ductile iron it goes a nice browny rusty colour, but the edges, they always seem to be smooth and shiny. Now this is can be achieved using graphite, so like edges of a pencil and the like, but otherwise Iron Warrior works really well where it's nice and worn on the edges. So you can go a bit mad and do a bit of sponging, but the other alternative is to use a dry brush, a nice thin one, in this case a makeup brush, which work really well and they're really dirt cheap. So, but you still want to be careful with how you're using it and not get in the center of any of the tiles. And there we go, you can sort of see the effect there. It's a bit of a yeah, more of a metallic vibe. You can see it especially around the actual yellow tiles in the center. I'm pleased with that now. And so technically you could leave it here, or you could start adding a few random powders like rubble dust or urban decay, black soot, dark iron. And if you're not feeling that it's rusty enough, you can start adding more rust powders to it if you really want. Now there are alternatives out there, because obviously the Forge of ones aren't available anymore, but here's a few examples. So this is aged rust. I don't know what the alternative would be in modern times. Aged rust is quite a dark one, so I'll dot that in over here into the recesses. That gives a nice little vibe. After that, let's show a bit of aged rust. The lid on this one completely perished, very old. This is a nice one as well, a bit softer, but still has its place. And then we have Forge World Light Rust. And once again, the lid has perished. Oh well, out of production now. Anyway, so this one's got a bit more of a chalky vibe to it, and it is still really nice. I think my favourite mixture would be a bit of the middle one and the left one. I think that'd be the perfect combination, but yeah, they're all good. So let's just have a little mess around with that and see what it looks like. So yeah, that's this painting guide pretty much complete now. I hope you really enjoyed it and I hope you actually got something out of it. There will be a painting guide very shortly for the walls as well as the stronghold. So I'll also show how they also fit in with the actual tiles. Also the reason why I decided to start on the tiles rather than do the wall segments first. Yeah, that's it. Let's put them to one side. Hope you enjoy your journey, and here we go. Finished. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.